choice. It's all about customizing the experience, right? It's all about how you want to go through the game.
Well, and that's something that's been the kind of a
Skills.
defining difference between
Skill choice.
One of the defining differences
Thank you,
between
Dragon
Western and Japanese RPGs for quite a while is that for whatever reason the Western ones are a lot more open-ended. Well, okay, I can throw an idea as to why this is, and Japanese ones are a little bit more on rails.
Yeah.
And the reason for that being is that Japanese RPGs are generally made for consoles, which are a little bit more from the beginning, like with Dragon Quest, were a little bit more limited and tried to be more accessible to everyone.
See, and
Whereas
I like
PC RPGs, Western RPGs generally, are a little bit more hardcore is not the right word, but maybe a little bit more twinky.
no, because some of those games that came out of Japan were freaking hard as balls.
Oh, sure.
So it's not necessarily a core, but I would say
But I'm going back to
open,
the first
free,
ones. Yeah.
free.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
it's a big one.
it is the if you want a true sandbox, go play the original Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
There's not even a game there, right? It's barely a game in the original Elder Scrolls. You just walk around. You can play the entirety of Skyrim. Oh, not the entirety. I take that back because playing the entirety would involve finishing a story.
Right.
But let's forget that for a second.
It's very ancillary.
You could just play
Sorry,
hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of Skyrim for the rest of your life and never ever complete a quest.
So bringing that back.
Never advance the narrative.
So as far as so let's divide this into two.
We'll get into an RPG conversation.
But that's fine.
That's good.
Because we kind of started the conversation talking about stories in video games, and there's really only two genres where it matters: adventure games, RPGs. We're talking about the RPGs now. So, as far as RPGs go, do you think stories are more important now in them? So now that Western RPGs seem to be top of the heap,
yeah,
so to speak, critically and I guess monetarily, a lot of people in gaming press are really down on Japanese RPGs the past 5 or so years.
yeah, Japanese RPGs are reeling outside of Japan.
And that's debatable.
Reeling outside of Japan.
They are all okay. Like sales wise, they're kind of reeling outside Japan.
Oh my god!
Except for maybe Final Fantasy, but even that's way down.
Even that's way down.
But regardless, all you hear about more recently with RPGs, at least here in America, is Fallout and Skyrim and
yes.
the
Well, those are, and that's just Bethesda, right? And then Kingdoms of Amalur, right?
Yeah,
look at all
exactly.
Witcher, Game of Thrones, all these games that come up that are American RPGs. So, in any case,
extra credits is probably. I keep hearing about that video. I haven't seen it.
Do I think?
According
to your question, that there is well, first of all, let me say this: I don't think that RPGs and adventure games are the places where only story resides or where only story is important.
I think that's where they mostly.
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, we got to generalize.
And
we don't have to.
There is a narrative to Pac-Man. I would say it's not the most defined narrative, but it is a narrative.
The narrative is Waka 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 Waka.
No, that's not the narrative. That would be the narrative of Fozzie Bear. You're confusing the two. Anyway, the point is, if I'm looking at RPGs and I answer your question, do I think that the quality of stories today are any worse or have declined at all from the stories of before? I'm of two minds. One, I would say is good art, right? And I've been swept up in many different stories that are awesome in video games. And my opinion's a little skewed because I don't really, walk into stories the way that I used to when I used to play video games, where you could just sit there and be immersed inside of a giant story. Now I kind of want to jump in and jump out. So my opinion's changed a little bit. So that part of me believes that the stories today are just as good as they've ever been. I don't know if people are as good as telling stories as they used to be.
So they're as good as they've ever been. Are you saying they're better?
No.
You're saying they're about the same.
I'd say they're about the same.
So they're about as important as they have been. There is no, video game narrative.
With those two genres, no question. With those two genres, no question.
Even with so you're saying
those are just as important as they've ever been. In other genres, you can make an argument either way. Because if you look at something like Zelda's an action adventure game. Does anybody give a shit about what's going on? Oh, is this PG? Give a shit about what's going on with Zelda? I mean, I do. I like the story of Zelda. I think it's cool. I think it's fun.
It really depends on the game.
But at the same time, you could easily go through Zelda and you don't even care who he is or who anybody else is. Or that he's trying to save, or that Link is trying to save Zelda, right? There you go.
STFU.
Boom. What about Mario? Right? Our princess is in another castle. Is that at all important that there's a lore?
I mean, there is a lore.
That there's
a story, but
there's
a
whole
to the game.
There's a whole
Really.
It
really doesn't matter.
There's a whole mythos to these characters. You're saying that doesn't matter?
I mean, maybe to a small.
Why is
the gameplay is much?
Why
more
is
important
Shrek
there.
Slam not as good as Smash Brothers? Because
Well,
Smash Brothers is this
story.
cool. It is. It's the
because of
history.
nostalgia.
No,
history is
no.
different from story, though.
No, mythos. It's okay. History's you're right. History's different. I'm saying mythos. Mythos is, by its definition, anecdotal, is story and narrative driven. The idea of the mythology of the gods is the story of how the gods came to be and created humanity and interact with them on a daily basis, right? So the mythos of Mario, not just in nostalgia, I'll give you nostalgia, I get that, but also the idea that Mario came from this place where he's this little tiny character on a screen trying to save a princess, to all the ways that we've known him all throughout the years. That's important. And if you put any character in there besides Mario, Smash Brothers is not a hit. It's just not. Even with all the mechanics, even with all the freaking music.
Yeah, but I disagree. That has a lot to do with the story of those particular games.
It's not about the story of the games per se. It's about the mythos. It's about the idea of what that character represents. That character doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Fun.
No question about that.
No, of course it doesn't.
No question about that. I agree. But that's what I'm trying to say. A good game gets both right. It's about being fun, has a fun premise, a good mechanic, or 2 or 3 or 4, and it's hard to get much more than that.
Uh-huh.
But it's also got an enthralling narrative. When you look at something like Minecraft, there's no story in Minecraft besides
what you make.
And then the story has to do with nothing but you and this world. And you have characters, and you've got a story. And if someone goes to you and says, "Oh, show me your Minecraft map," are you going to sit there and go, "Oh, there's my castle, and there's blah blah," and that's it? No, you're going to go, "Hey, you know what's funny? When I started building this castle, I was building it in the middle of the day, and this creeper came out of nowhere and blew up half of it before I could finish it. And so I had to basically put these candles everywhere, or these torches everywhere, to make sure I could finish the." You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no narrative there. But it's the best narrative I've ever seen. The most immersed I've been in a story in a game in a long time is Minecraft.
Okay.
Let that blow your mind for a minute. And Minecraft is neither an adventure game, nor is it an RPG.
Well, I'm not saying that there aren't stories.
There are RPG elements too.
In other genres of games. I just think it's less important to the game.
Yeah. So
there's a story to Asteroids.
So
but it doesn't
let me ask you this.
Really matter. That's all about the gameplay.
If Minecraft were a game that started up, right, and it was in the middle of, so you popped up as this person and it was just black all around you,
mm-hmm.
and all you did was place blocks of whatever kind you wanted to, would that be exciting or enthralling at all? No. At that point it would be CAD. Right?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, it would be like you just paint, right? Minecraft is fun because you find this such a novel concept of you're alone in this place, you're all by yourself, and all of a sudden the music that was what got me. I'm just sitting there like messing around. All of a sudden the music starts and I go, God, I'm so alone in this place.
But again, that's very different from story.
But it is it is a narrative. It is so important to
but it's
what
one
Minecraft
you make
is.
up in your mind. That's not a set one that's developed by
that's
Notch.
But that's different, right?
Or anyone else that works on it.
To say that a game doesn't have a narrative because the creator doesn't imbue it with certain, I guess, elements, or doesn't overtly beat you over the head with it, doesn't mean that the game doesn't have a story. I think a game has an experience and a narrative that gets replicated, because if you get together with Minecraft fans, it might mean completely different things to them, but you know what? Everybody has that same feeling that first day that they're out there and night comes and they don't know what to expect.
Okay. But I think you have a very more kind of wishy-washy, fluid.
Of course, I finished with a humanities degree, and you finished with a degree in the sciences. So
okay, so that makes more sense. So when I say story, I mean story. When you say story, you mean anything.
No. When you say story, you mean M. Night Shyamalan. When I say story, I mean
what a twist.
Yeah, when I say story, I mean this fluid, artistic, dynamic thing that produces meaning in something.
Okay. I think you can have a game with no story, or almost no story.
Yeah.
And great gameplay. And you can have the reverse. You can have a game that's almost all story.
Correct.
And no gameplay.
No question about
what
it.
we were just talking about before this podcast started was Radical Dreamers.
Yep.
Which, if you've ever played, is like the little bridge between Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. It's essentially like a text adventure game.
Yes.
Text adventure game.
It is a text adventure game.
Text adventure games are essentially stories.
Yeah.
And that's about it. There's no real gameplay. I mean, slightly, whatever. Depends on what you're talking about. But you have those, but those are much rarer than games that depend on gameplay over story, over having no
right.
story.
Like, who cares?
Pac-Man, like Donkey Kong.
No one cares that the pig stole the eggs from the birds in Angry Birds.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
I agree. But Angry Birds is a great game. But it wouldn't ever be in a place where story is important. But Angry Birds is and this is where it gets to what I think you were saying. Angry Birds is a populist game, right? It's for everybody.
Oh, I thought
it's for a general
like
audience.
The pigs are the proletariat.
No, Jesus. No, I'm not saying that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's actually an enactment of Animal Farm. No. Although maybe it is. I don't know. Yeah. The point is that that there are games out there that are very niche, that rely so heavily on story that there's no way to interact with them in any other capacity. And in fact, for me, let's say you go and play Final Fantasy. If you go and play a Final Fantasy game and all you're thinking about are numbers, right? How can I do the most attacks? How can I get the right number of hits in? How can I balance my defenses correctly? Then you're probably missing 70% of the game, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you could even take a look and see at other kinds of games where you would never miss it at all, right? You would never miss any of it.
Akira VGA has an interesting point that just went off the screen.
That's because you're not fast enough.
People are talking so quick. What about role playing in MMORPGs? People create their own stories within the existing game using a story.
It's like as Minecraft.
Well, Minecraft is the same as MMORPGs in that respect.
And people have modded Minecraft to do the exact same thing as an MMO, where there are story elements that are provided, and then there are story elements that arise spontaneously.
Now, I honestly haven't played Minecraft in a while, but last I heard there was talk about an adventure mode.
So adventure mode is what survival turned into. Survival is now adventure mode. The issue is with adventure mode now there are levels, you level up, you're hungry all the time.
But there's not
you have to
story.
manage your hunger. No, but there is an end boss.
Okay.
And there's no reason to kill it other than just glory.
Yes.
I don't know. Anyway, the point is, I think story is very, very, very important. And it's funny because when we started thinking, we talked about this for a while. Like I said, it came up in the first podcast. Mm-hmm. There was an article today on Joystick that I thought, even though it got some of the facts wrong, did a really great job of talking about how story can be moving in a video game. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason, in fact, one of the big reasons that you and I are here right now, Clan of the Grey Wolf is here, we're talking to all you wonderful people, is because we think there are great games out there that have great stories that should be celebrated, that are awesome, right? And the story is about Cecil, or Cecil, I guess, at Mount Ordeals,
Cecil.
right?
Yes. Well,
they say Cecil in the DS remake, so that's Square Enix, but I say Cecil. So my point is, Cecil goes to Mount Ordeals and becomes a paladin, right? Mm-hmm. And has to fight himself, and has to face his own demons, has to deal with a very difficult boss fight, all these other things that happen to him along the way, Palom and Perome, so on and so forth, right? It's very quick. It's not a huge part of the story. Probably takes about an hour, all said and done. Mm-hmm. Especially if you know what you're doing, it takes a lot less than that, right? But once you go through that experience, it's something extremely memorable. And the point of the article was, number one, that games can move you to that degree, even a 16-bit game.
Yeah.
Number one, and number two, that the Final Fantasies and whatever RPGs of today could take a good lesson from that. That you don't have to have these